The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give just a couple more minutes for a few people to log on, and then we'll get started. All right, everyone. I have more people on the line, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today, we are going to be talking about working with chapter finances as the 2017 December advisor webinar. My name is Kelsey Morrissey, and I am a chapter development director with the fraternity. And part of my role outside of working with a set group of chapters on a daily basis is working with chapter finance. So what I mean by this is any chapter that has financial questions, falls into debt, or just wants to work on finances in general, I'm the person that they go to. I don't necessarily do any of the accounting side of things, but definitely work with students one-on-one as much as possible. So this webinar came about after a year and a half of working with the chapters on finances and realizing that a lot of our members don't have a lot of or do have a lot to learn, even in general, about finances, whether it be personal or with the organization. So we'll get started. So finances can be hard to talk about and cover a wide range of questions. So I want to preface before we go over this overview that I know there are a lot of specific questions a lot of advisors have that pop up with your chapters. I might to answer all of those specifically in this webinar, but I will open the door to having any conversation with you guys afterwards to answering questions that you have, even if we have to set up another time to chat on the phone or start emails, etc. So with that in mind, what we'll be working through today is framing why finances are so difficult for our members and how you can help. Then we'll go through some of the ways that we've been found helpful in teaching our members what financial commitments of the chapter are, how to track and manage funds appropriately, how to even work with brothers on understanding and paying their dues on time. And then lastly, I'll walk through some best practices that I've seen working with our chapters. So let's frame this conversation on why finances are so difficult for our members. Frankly, most of them do not have previous education regarding finances. Many of our high schools are starting to take finance education out of their curriculum, and we're finding that actually a lot of parents are not teaching their children finances at home either. Because of this, many of our members are not comfortable with the topic of finances as it is normally not talked about. Many of our members don't even want to chat about money as they see it as a completely private matter. And it gives them anxiety because it can seem confrontational to ask someone why they can't pay, or even just to pay their dues in general. Then you find that this is compounded by the idea that we are brothers in this organization and we should be lenient with the men because we like them and we care for them, and it's all about brotherhood. But the idea that paying for dues as is part of your actual commitment to being a member is very hard for some of our men to grasp because they are so uncomfortable speaking about the topic in general. We're also in a time when many of the men have been budgeting to zero with every paycheck or allowance that's them. So, for example, if you have you get $200 a week from mom and dad or from your job, our men are spending that $200 that week and taking it down to zero. When you have this as their idea of budgeting, and then you give them a chapter budget of thousands and thousands of dollars, there's definitely a need to teach what the differences are between those two ideas of budgeting. I think it's also important to note that our members are at the tail end of the millennial generation, and we're starting to see a lot more Gen Z men come through. These men have been in a total digital area, excuse me, even surrounding money. So cash, even though cash is sometimes at play, everything is done from a credit card. You can pass money along through Bank Pay and Venmo and all these other apps. So you start to see electronics really taking over, where you're not actually seeing physical cash being passed, and the value of that is very different now. I would even tell you that don't be surprised if a man you work with doesn't even know how to write a check. They probably have never had to do so before, and we're seeing that more and more, that a lot of our men have just never had to do it. It's also common to think about that our men have never or rarely have seen paper invoices. A lot of them have their bills set up to automatically withdraw out of their accounts. So over the last 6 months, even, I've seen that, teaching how to read a bill has been something that I've really had to hone in with some of our members. I think that for us, it seems really simple that they should be able to do that. But if a parent has always taken care of finances, or it's automatic, or it's just something they've never had to do, we do need to teach it, and we need to be patient with that teaching. We also find that finances are difficult because of a lack of consistency from year to year with the budgeting, with pay, and even the accounting. The lack of transitions we have between our officers creates a problem, as each officer really wants to reinvent the wheel and change how finances are done. Additionally, when management systems are not used or are changed frequently, we can start to see finances as less of a function of the fraternity and more as like a side bonus, although we really should be thinking of finances as a pivotal part of the fraternity experience. When you have frequent changes or no management system, you also start to see that there's a lack of trust amongst the members because they don't know what's going on, and you see trust fail with parents if they're paying for their children's bills, and so it's very important to think of transparency and consistency in that. I'm seeing some questions through. We will give you a copy of this presentation afterwards if you want it, so just let me know if that's something that you want. Moving on. So what can you as advisors do? I think first of all, you need to be heavily involved in the finances of the chapter. I think your name should be on the bank accounts. You should be following through with bills being paid, setting up consistent meeting times to chat with about the finances of the chapter, like every 2 weeks. If you're creating a consistent relationship with, I think, even the VP Finance and the president, they're going to be more likely to trust you, let you in, and talk openly about the books, about where their finances are, and even ask questions of things that they don't understand. For example, I think you see invoices come out once a month from IHQ. So those invoices show all the open balances on a chapter's account. When those come out as advisors, even though it seems as our members should be able to read it, look at it, and pay it if there is an open balance. Our advisors really should be following up with them and saying, hey, did you see that email? Do you understand how much you need to pay? When is that check out? Again, that seems like hand holding, but I just think that extra ability to check in and create that consistent relationship is very important as an advisor. Additionally, I think focusing on finance education and transparency with the full chapter is completely crucial. A lot of our men, like we've already established, don't have great personal finance backgrounds or even an idea of what finances are in a grander scheme of things. You even as a struggle with finance majors. They get so high up in some of the other things in the finance world of business that we forget to get down to the basics, the simple things. So I think teaching about, or advisors come in and focus on teaching about personal budgeting, ways to save money, how to track your funds. Those educational opportunities are a great way to connect with the chapter and then teach them something that they're going to need to know, but also probably want to know. Additionally, I think working on ensuring that there's full transparency with dues in the chapter is very important. I think many of our men, based on my conversations, don't know where their dues are going, whether that's to IHQ or the chapter, et cetera. But when they don't know what they're specifically paying for, it causes a lot of rift within them just paying their dues in general or paying them on time. I think reviewing the budget with the chapter frequently can be a key part of the advisor and VP finance role, because if you're talking about where the are, how much money we have, why we can or can't do something, that's going to make sure that the entire chapter knows, like, hey, we do need to pay this because we're not going to be able to have formal unless we do, or hey, one member is holding us back from being able to do this because their dues haven't come in. Having those conversations frequently, and you as an advisor helping the VP finance have that, or you doing those together, I think completely crucial and something we're missing in a lot of our chapters right now. Lastly, I think advisors can work with the VP of Finance on educating them about the financial commitments of the chapter, tracking and managing funds appropriately, and how to work with brothers on understanding and paying dues. We're going to go through each of those last 3 bullets pretty specifically right now. So thinking about educating on what financial commitments of the chapter are. I think as you begin your relationship with the new VP Finance, which most of you will going into January, it is important to start with the basics of finance and then move deeper. I think the goal is to provide an overview of the finances of the chapter and to ensure that the VP Finance knows what the chapter is paying for. So the steps I've listed here are what I would suggest to work with the VP Finance on to help them understand finances on a greater level. So first, I would work together on creating a master list of financial commitments that the chapter has. I would actually just brainstorm this from the get-go. So just sit down, ask the question, what do you think we actually have to pay for? It's a good way to see where they're at, what they may be missing, or just kind of their general conception of what the chapter's budget looks like before they even jump into the budget. Then, as a second step, I would pull out the budget, start comparing the brainstorm list to the budget. So, think about what are areas that we missed? What are areas that have the most funds going to them? Is there anything that's surprising? Kind of have that conversation with him and keep it open and honest while you're walking through the budget. Then I would create a calendar of when all bills come in or expected to come in, when the payments need to go out, etc. This doesn't have to be something set in stone, but I think recognizing the ebb and flow of the bills and payments that are coming in that the chapter has to send out will give a greater understanding of the status of our bank account or where the chapter actually stands financially. Then I think after you do that, you can map this to the chapter's due schedule. So thinking about, hey, we know that of the bills for IHQ come in the fall, so we know that that's going to be a heavy summer time in like August and September. So how do we make sure we understand that? Also helps you understand, like, maybe you can allow for 5 to 10 men to pay late, but you have kind of a number in your head of, okay, if people need payment plans, we can kind of forgive X amount right now, but we're going to need it on the back end later. I think knowing all of this information will really start the VP to help the VP find out what the grand scheme of things are with the chapter. I think it also provides full transparency. I would share this with the chapter, take time to go through it so that they understand what the VP has discovered, because the more transparency we have, the better off we'll be in the long run. Something else to think about. So this is the basic buckets that I've seen when working with chapters, 5 areas. If you have asterisk mark there of where you see most of your money going to, or what most of the money that goes out towards. So IHQ dues being a huge one, officer, so that should include everything with VP recruitment, doing recruiting activities, brotherhood events, formals, t-shirts, all of that can fit into officer budgets. Obviously having a savings or an emergency fund, and then attending educational programs. So those are the big buckets to think about when you're teaching those financial commitments of the chapter. Next, moving into tracking and managing funds appropriately. Unfortunately, I don't think I have a step-by-step process for educating on this one, but I think these are some topic areas that really should be discussed or implemented between advisors and the VP Finance. First of all, there needs to be a checks and balances system between the VP, other officers, and the advisor. Things like having 2 signatures for checks. You need reimbursement form or a funds request form that the advisor has to approve on. Anything like that would be what I'm talking about with checks and balances. This creates an opportunity for the VP to understand that finance is much bigger than just them, and it gives an opportunity for all officers to have kind of a say in finances. Also, I think chapters really need to utilize a financial management system, and they accurately and to its full potential. I would say most of our chapters are using LegFi or OmegaFi or some accountant firm, but there are still quite a few that don't. And even those that are using these services don't know how to use them properly or accurately. They're great services. I actually have contacts with the account reps from LegFi and OmegaFi. So if you need me to contact them, put you guys in good communication, I can help you with that. But both services, especially LegFi and OmegaFi, will provide webinars and training to new officers and advisors on how the system works, how to use it to the best advantage, and actually use it. I find that a lot of our men, they're like, we switched to LegFi, but we don't like it. And I ask why, and they don't actually know how to use it. So if you don't know how to use it, then you can't track and manage your funds appropriately. And then they start doing things on the side, and then you ebbs and flows, and you fall maybe into a not so good financial situation. I think instilling the importance of record keeping is very much a thing that we don't do. And I don't think it has to be about just who pays and who doesn't and where our bills actually are. But I think writing out anything every week that was surprising that popped up, anything that became a struggle, questions that the VP has, that he can then come to you guys as advisors to come back to. That type of record keeping is important, because then you can build a transition document out of it. You can add into every month, or knowing that February something is going to up, that maybe the new VP, when you transition again, isn't going to know. But having that record keeping in that manner, I think, is very important as well. Doing a monthly audit of the books, I think, is something that an advisor should really work on as well. And it doesn't have to be all the way into the books, but just a quick sweep to make sure nothing seems strange, writing out comments or thoughts that you see, have a discussion if there is something strange that happens, but you can go to the VP with those thoughts, share them, have a conversation, make sure everything is on track. And then lastly, I think it's so important, like I said earlier, to review how to read bills and invoices, how to write checks, how to read bank statements. And even last week, I taught a new VP Finance how to write a check. He didn't know where to sign the check. He had never done so before. And so it seems silly that our men don't know this, but I promise you, even there's finance majors that don't know how to read invoices and bank statements and write checks. So just patiently working with them through those, I think, is definitely an important factor. Next, working with brothers on how to understand and pay dues. I think there's a path for this, and it's basically what you see on your screen. So you start with establishing a need for dues, explain the due structure, and then move to explaining due dates, provide a written agreement to sign, and then follow through with the agreement. What I thought the best way to show this is to do this with like IHQ dues. So just going to go through this by steps so it makes sense for you to teach a VP Finance, like, hey, here are some steps you can do, and this is how IHQ does it as well. So step one, establish a need for dues. What you see on our screen is the basic breakdown of where our money goes and why we need funds. We're an organization that has several needs for function, and we need the funds in order to provide the services to our chapters, to provide educational programs, to put out the quarterly, for alumni services, and then, of course, to operate a staff. We are a dues-paying organization that functions because of the members we have and the dues that they pay. And with the dues paid, we provide all these services. So President's Academy, RLA, Dual, Building Better Men retreats, chapter visits, etc. So when you look at all of this, this is our justification for dues. This is where your money goes. This is where why we need dues, and describing, hey, we are a dues paying organization and we function because of our members. I think it's very important to establish. You can do this with your chapters as well. Establish why we have the different buckets we have for our budget, and say this is why we need to do this. This is part of the experience. Then you move to explaining the due structure in full. I made it basic here. Obviously, your guys's can be a little bit more complex, but this is what we have. We have every semester dues that you pay. So we have a chapter fee, we have a member fee, you have the loss prevention, and then we have our directors and officers coverage that happens in the fall. So here you can very clearly see what is expected to be paid. Obviously, per member means you have to decide how many members are in the chapter, but you've taken the time to show exactly the breakdown. So you guys can take each of your buckets and show, hey, this is what your fees are going to, or hey, X amount of dollars for every member is going to recruitment, or we're going to spend $20 on t-shirts this year, and so $20 of your dues is going to t-shirts, and so the breakdown is there. Even going into nuances like, hey, directors and officers coverage is just in the fall, or insurance. This is a big one. It's split 75-25. Give you an explanation for that. We get billed by the insurance company at the beginning of every academic year. And as an organization, we decided that we needed to split 75-25 so that the entire burden of the 100% wasn't on the chapter right at the beginning of the fall semester, because we don't think that that's fair. So we tried to lessen the burden, which is why it's not 50-50, but 75-25, because we get billed at the front of every year. We know it's the largest payment that chapters make to us. So we're trying to help lessen that burden. So by me even just saying that in just a couple seconds, I was able to explain why there is a due structure in that way. It's a better understanding. When you're creating that understanding, you're allowing for the men to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Instead of just assuming that they know what their dues are going for, or assuming they know the justification. Most of the time, they don't. You can also take it down to break it down per man, like I showed X dollars at the bottom. So you can break all that down and show that piece as well. Next is explaining due dates. So here I have billing dates and due dates. We bill all semester at the same time, and it's due the same time every single year. Same with the spring semester. You guys may have more due dates and billing dates. You may bill every month. Write that out. Show it at the beginning of the semester or before the semester even begins. Knowing what the due dates are so important for men just to be able to pay on time and say, hey, or not be able to say, hey, we didn't know. But if you set it out front, let everyone know, then it's there. We also give a month's notice of the billing with invoices. So, send out August 15th, due September 15th. In the spring, you get even longer because we know that members are out of school. So just recognizing that doing that also helps with your billing dates and just explaining it. Step was to provide a written agreement to sign. IHQ can't necessarily do written agreements like this, but because every chapter is a subsidiary of the organization, there's a mutual agreement that bills will be in that way. But for our chapters, a contract like this holds members accountable to paying and provides all details regarding dues. This seems simple, guys. I know it seems simple. There are so many chapters that do not have a written agreement that everyone signs every year. They don't have a contract. They don't, have separate signatures that acknowledge that, hey, I understand this. I think having a contract like this is doing your due diligence in providing all information regarding finances, so there are no confusion points. So if you're not doing this already, we really need to do it. This can be with a housing contract. It can be separate. You can do it however you want, but I think it's important to understand that there are things that you need to write this out. Something I forgot earlier, thank you, Jeff, for pointing this out. There are different due dates for some of our chapters that are on the core system. They know those, and we work with them on that, but we sometimes push due dates for fall semester to October 1st and some of the February dates to February 15th. So trying to help with that quarter system school calendar a little bit. Lastly, in our calendar or in our process is following through with the agreement. It is the VP Finance needs to do their due diligence, and you guys can help with this and sending out the bills at least 1 month prior to the due date, sending a reminder 2 weeks out, sending a reminder 1 week out. If dues are not paid on the due date, follow up with a reminder the day after. If dues don't get paid, then charge a late fee. It is a responsibility of being a member of the chapter to pay your bills. I do understand that there are special circumstances with brothers and their finances, and we want to be able to understand that and work with them, but this is your basic model. We'll get into working with struggling members here in just a second. I think there's been questions of if people don't pay their bills on time, what do you do? Well, first step is, charge that late fee and then follow up with, hey, why haven't you paid? Have that conversation. If they're going to continually not pay, then they're not following through on their obligations of the fraternity, and they can be set up for suspension or expulsion by the chapter. You can follow through with the procedures of the fraternity. Make sure that those are in your bylaws as well, but you can put members up for suspension for not paying. You can put them up for expulsion for not paying. That is a basic right of membership, or a privilege of membership, is getting having your finances in check. So we want to let you know that is a possibility, but we definitely want to focus working with our chapter members first to ensure that we're giving them every chance, because some members do have special circumstances. So we'll jump into that a little bit here as well. So how to teach working with brothers who are struggling with finances. I think first you have to create an understanding with the brother. You need to be open with the conversation. And this can come from the advisor point, or where you guys can teach this to your VP finance. But again, they're probably not going to be comfortable talking about it. And you're working with brothers who are struggling, who are also not comfortable talking about it. So having an advisor or an older member there to help with that conversation would be really important. But I think creating an understanding of what the situation is and sharing the finance situation of the chapter will help that member and the VP and you guys as advisors create a plan. The second step in this, I think, is showing empathy towards the situation. There's no need to be upset or rude about if somebody cannot pay in, full immediately, or that needs a payment plan. I think we need to create a space where it's okay to talk about it. Not everyone has the ability to pay up front. Sometimes we have chapter members that are working and they need to pay monthly. Sometimes we have chapter members that hit really bad family situations and they're used to their family paying for their dues, and now they don't have that, or a medical emergency happened. And so just opening up and saying, hey, that's okay, but we still need to work on a plan of paying and a plan that works for both of us. Then moving towards writing an agreement, whatever makes sense for both the member and the chapter. Sometimes that means you have to push the member a little bit more than they want to be pushed. Sometimes that means the chapter has to just know that you're not going to have some funds to do something up front, but being okay with that. Or, as I said previously, knowing how many people you can allow to pay a little bit later, or what their fund needs are up front before you talk to member is important. I think the VP, the member, the advisor, and the president should sign this agreement and know everybody, that small group of people knows it and is able to follow through with it. So it can still be a private matter, so not the entire chapter has to know, but that agreement then becomes the actual financial agreement for that member. So they're not going to be charged late fees unless they're not paying per the agreement on the late fee, or on that to get the late fee. I think it's also important to know that agreements can come in all shapes and sizes. So if a member needs to pay $20 a week, $25 a week, okay, let's do that. Some want to pay every paycheck. We're going to give you $150 every paycheck. Great. If you want to pay, in other lump sums every 6 weeks, the VP and you as an advisor should work through what that looks like and what's appropriate, but knowing that the member should have some options like that to be able to pay on time. And then lastly, following through with the agreement, just as they should be through with all other members, the VP should be following up on, the timeline of the due dates to make sure that the finances are coming through, that they are getting paid and not getting behind. So we want to make sure we do the due diligence that we can to ensure that that member understands and knows that we are serious about finances, but still empathetic to a potential situation that they may have. All right, going toward the tail end of this, guys. So best practices. Like I said, I've been working with our chapters with finances for about 1.5 years now, and I've really seen some chapters do great things and some chapters that have started doing some of these things listed and have seen some success. So we'll go through each of these briefly, but if you're already doing them, great, or you can improve upon them, great. But this is kind of the that I've been able to come up with. So first, use a financial management system. LegFi is our preferred partner. We have a really good relationship with them. Would highly suggest using them if you're not already. OmegaFi is great as well, or an outside accountant, that's fine. I highly suggest that members are not doing QuickBooks on their own. If they want to do QuickBooks, that's fine, but an advisor needs to be up and on that and understanding it. And they should not just be using an Excel document. That is not proper right now. It allows for mismanagement of funds very easily. So we really do need to be using a financial management system. And like I said earlier, we need to be using it to its full potential. So if we need help with webinars and trainings on those systems, then I can definitely help with the LegFi and OmegaFi part. Second, keep up to date with the financial and or housing contracts. Have one in the first place. There are many chapters that don't. You need to sign one at the beginning of every academic year, or even at the tail end of an academic year for the year. Again, you can have finance and housing in one, if that makes sense. That can include the meals, all the dues, etc. In it, or you can separate it out for housing going in place, and then you have a separate one for just the dues to the chapter, the money they get to use, not just for housing. So that's very important. Chapters should set the dues at the same rate each semester. I see that chapters will, again, budget to zero and say, oh, well, fall, you get big IHQ dues, so we're going to charge $600 in the fall, but we're only going to charge $200 in the spring. Then you're budgeting to zero, and then come fall again, there's a big bill, and you have to expect that everyone's paying on time, and that doesn't always help. But if you're splitting it and still thinking of dues as a 50-50 thing, then and saving the money from spring to fall, then you're really starting to help create a good atmosphere for dues and the rotation of dues. And it also kind of helps, after about a year and a half of doing it, will help offset the crazy amount of dues that come from IHQ in the fall because of the LP billing situation. Chapters should set deadlines for payments at least 1 week prior to the deadline of the bill they need to pay. A lot of our chapters will know that September 15th their IHQ dues are due, so they set their due date for September 15th as well. Well, that doesn't help if somebody's going to pay a little late. That doesn't help if somebody doesn't pay on time that you didn't know of. That also doesn't help because you can't send the bill or the check to IHQ on time to pay your bill on time. Unfortunately, we do have the biggest finance charge with the roster fees. So you want to make sure that those are due on time and that we receive those and that they're postmarked appropriately. So chapter setting deadlines prior to is very important in my mind. You can also set these deadlines, worked with chapters on setting a deadline or sending out bills early June or July for being billed in August and getting that money in earlier. A lot of chapters have had success with that, and it's not unheard of to do that as well. So if you have problems with late fee or late payments or not knowing when people are going to pay their bills on time or not, then I think that could be a good solution. I think the chapter being transparent where all dues are coming from and going to is very important, like we talked about earlier, so I won't harp on that. Be open about creating payment plans with members. I think it's so important to know, like I just mentioned in the previous slide, that some people do struggle with finances, and that's okay. If we want to work with them to the best of our ability, and being okay with that, we need to be open. Chapter utilizing financial review board, also very important. So a lot of you guys have academic review boards or judicial boards. You can make a financial review board as well, or you can use it as a judicial board. But if somebody is not paying their dues on time consistently, they're not following through with the payment plan they made, etc., a board of people can meet with them and decide together what the mode of action needs to be. Do they pay something huge up front, and if they do that, they're fine? Great. Maybe they do get put up for suspension by this board. Maybe they get put up for expulsion to the chapter by this board. But having a review board of different members is really a good thing to have as well. I think the president and VP finance meeting monthly with the chapter and the finance advisor regarding finances is very, very important. So I even said bi-weekly earlier, but at least monthly, you guys as advisors should be meeting with the president and the VP finance to understand where the finances are, what's happening, anything strange happening, anything great happening, everything through that together. Chapters should be saving 5% of their budget every semester. It is a CEP bonus point for that, but it's just so important. Many of our members don't understand the value of having savings or emergency funds just in case something happens. So we want to ensure that they are saving that budget and that you guys as advisors are enforcing, hey, we need to save 5% of what's collected every semester or more. You could do more. The next one, read monthly statements sent by IHQ and pay accordingly. You guys do get 2 statements every month if you owe money. The combination of both those statements gives you your goal. But reading through that with the VP Finance and understanding it every month and making sure a check goes out to pay that off every month is very important. A lot of our members have said, oh, I saw it, but I didn't know we owed money. That seems silly again, but going through with them, yes, this is a statement. This means you owe money. Yes, we need to send a check to that. Can be very important in working with our VPs. And last, if you have questions, call Jana. Jana is always here. Unfortunately, I'm on the road, but Jana can answer all questions about your statements, about your billing, if something seems wrong or right, or when a payment came in, all of those things. She is so happy to help you guys with those questions and answer them as much as possible. So either from advisors or our VPs, ensuring that they know that they can call Jana and she will be a help to them. To open a relationship up with me, but knowing that I am on the road, so calling the office, you may not always get me, but if we have a relationship, then we can make that happen via my cell phone and other methods as well. So these are kind of the best practices that I have listed so far. So that wraps most of this up. I wanted to open the floor to questions. On your side toolbar, there should be an ability that says questions for you to answer or type them, and I can answer them. So I'll stay on the line for a little bit. I will try to grab all of your email addresses from the registration and send out this presentation as well, so that way you guys can use it. I'm hoping it's for each of you. I know finances can be hard to work with, and sometimes we have a different idea of finances, but understanding where our students are at and working with them fully is really the best way that we can ensure great financial success with our chapters. So anyway, if you have questions, please throw them in the question pool. If not, you can log off and we'll be done. I will give you, this is my name again and my email address, so you can email me if you have any other questions, or if you would like to set up time for me to chat with you about specific questions, or sit down with your VP Finance to go over some stuff. I'm more than happy to make that happen as well. I'm not seeing any questions, but if you still have them, please feel free to type them out. Again, I'll stay on the line for just a couple more minutes, but if you feel good, thank you for coming to the presentation, and hope you guys have a good afternoon and a good holiday season. If with whatever holidays you guys celebrate, enjoy the time.